Okay, we're back with the Stephen Avery trial. This will be video 11. And we left off with Mr. Kratz speaking, and he is still speaking to the jury. And so we will begin there on page 59, verse 1. Ready? Let's go. Now, the evidence is also going to show you where on the property Teresa Halbach's vehicle was found. It was found in, not accidentally, the furthest point from the defendant's trailer. Again, you are going to find that it was intentionally obscured, that it had immediate access to something called a car crusher on the property. And again, just to orient you, Stephen Avery's trailer is in the lower left-hand portion of this particular photograph. Where it was found was not an accident. We'll also tell you during the course of the introduction of the testimony that it's important where it wasn't found. It wasn't found on a roadway. Wasn't found in some mall parking lot. It was found on the Avery salvage property, the family business property. I talked about the car crusher. You will hear a little bit about that piece of equipment that was near or right next to Teresa Halbach's vehicle. You are going to learn and you are going to hear evidence sometime through this 6 weeks on how this piece of equipment works, how a regular looking vehicle, car, SUV, truck, starts out looking like a regular vehicle and ends up flattened or smashed. You are going to learn why it's important that Teresa's vehicle was next to the car crusher, and you are going to learn the numbers of crushed vehicles and how easily Teresa Halbach's vehicle could never have been found in this case. Could have been slipped in between, if you will, one of those other cars. You will hear about a lot of professionals that were asked to perform assistance in this case. You are going to hear about law enforcement professionals. You are going to hear about crime lab analysts. You are going to hear about some very, very well qualified expert witnesses. And all of those professionals have 2 legs. One of them, though, has 4. It's a Belgian shepherd named Brutus. Brutus is a search and rescue or search and recovery dog that is insensitively called a cadaver dog. What Brutus does is one thing. Brutus is highly trained, and you are going to hear testimony from Brutus's handler, Julie Kramer. Brutus does one thing, and that's find where a deceased person has been. The first official, first professional to approach this vehicle after it's found, after law enforcement secures that area so nobody else can get around there. The first professional was a 4-legged variety. It was Brutus. It was a canine. And Brutus, you are going to hear, was asked, not directed towards this vehicle, but asked to just search around this particular location. You are going to hear evidence that late in the afternoon on the 5th, after the vehicle was found, after a search warrant was already obtained in this case, what Brutus, when approaching Teresa Halbach's vehicle alerted. It's called hitting on the vehicle. It was quite a dramatic alert, and you are going to hear from Mrs. Kramer about that. Sadly and unfortunately, that meant one thing to the handler, and that meant one thing to the lead investigators in the case. Early on, they suspected, because of Brutus, because of this search and rescue dog, because of this cadaver dog, that a deceased individual either was in the back of this SUV or at some point had been in the back of that SUV. Now, importantly, you are also going to hear that the police decided not to touch the vehicle at that time. The police decided not to process it, even when the crime lab was on the scene. You are going to hear that the crime lab loaded this vehicle onto an enclosed trailer, trucked the enclosed and intact SUV all the way to Madison, where on Sunday, for a very brief amount of time, but mostly on Monday, that vehicle was processed by the experts, processed by those state agents, by those state crime lab expert employees' analysis, when they made some very dramatic and very important findings in the case. I don't want to get ahead of myself, because on November 5th, on that very first night, on that first afternoon, there were places to look, as you can imagine. After Teresa Halbach's vehicle was found on the Avery salvage property, Mr. Weigert, Mr. Fassbender, directing many law enforcement officials, had a job to do. Now, you saw the size of the Avery salvage property. You are going to hear testimony from Mr. Fassbender. He's going to provide you with an idea about the methodology, about the plan, the search plan in this case. You are going to hear Agent Fassbender talk about missing persons investigations, and when they go from missing persons to criminal investigations, how their thought process changes. But at that early stage, when they find the vehicle, when they don't know that there is any blood in the back of the vehicle, when they don't know if a body is involved in this case, that Agent Fassbender and every other law enforcement officer you will hear at that scene had one thing in mind, and that was to find Teresa. The job of the police at the time was to find Karen Halbach's daughter. And you are going to hear the evidence that the officers made very, very quick work of searching all of the residences on the Avery salvage property, all of the 4 residences, all of the outbuildings. They are searching for Teresa Halbach, and the search plan, again, is to find the victim, find the victim's body. But a secondary obligation of theirs is also to look for obvious signs of evidence, right? You don't have to watch CSI to know that. At least at a first kind of sweep, or a first kind of look through, or a first kind of search of all of these residences, are to try to find obvious signs of a crime, if, in fact, a crime did occur, or something that is going to help law enforcement find Teresa Halbach. Why I say all that is because Stephen Avery, with search warrant in hand, Stephen Avery's residence was searched on the 5th. Now, again, we're looking for Teresa's body, hopefully alive, but if not, it is important to find if she's on that property. Stephen Avery's garage is searched, other residences, all of the other buildings on the residence are searched, the salvage business itself. But the 4,000 vehicles and what you will hear was a torrential downpour were also examined for the first time on the evening of the 5th. Now, law enforcement officers were involved in that, but Brutus's friends were also involved in that. Other canines, the rest of the team, the other search and rescue animals, the canines, were taken in a downpour in the pitch dark out on a 40-acre property, and every one of these cars was encircled by one of those dogs trying to find Teresa Halbach. Please recall, at this early stage, the police don't know what they are looking for yet. They don't really have an idea yet of the kinds of things that they are looking for. So when you remember this search plan, you will hear evidence, and some officers may even call it the funnel approach. Nothing fancy about calling it the funnel approach. It makes sense. It's a way to describe search efforts. It is actually an interviewing technique as well. But it's a way to find evidence in a funnel type of approach. We're looking for the body first. Then we're looking for obvious signs of evidence. Then as you get closer and closer into more detail, more thorough, more directed searches, because you are able to go back into all of those places and all of those properties. That's the methodology. And that was Stephen Avery at no particular speed. And I also will be doing part 12 today. So you can also practice there. Have a great day and happy practicing.